A tech firm was hours from a $40 million deal until everything crashed. Their only hope? A janitor's 12-year-old daughter. Thursday, 3:17 p.m. Vantage Core Solutions, headquartered in downtown Dallas, was humming with tension. Not the usual kind you find at a tech startup chasing big money. This was different. This was fear, raw and unfiltered. CEO Elliot Trammell stood frozen in front of the wall-mounted screen in the war room, what they called their conference center on the 12th floor. The screen had gone black minutes ago, taking with it the company's back-end infrastructure, data systems, and communications. Not a glitch, a total shutdown. "Tell me this isn't real," he muttered, barely audible. From behind him, his VP of Engineering, Shira Collins, typed furiously on her laptop, sweat lining her brow. "It's not just us. The whole internal network is dead. Email, backups, security protocols, even our mirror servers are offline." Elliot turned. "That's impossible. Those backups are on separate grids." "They were," she said without looking up. "Something tunneled in and collapsed the entire file structure. We're dealing with a root-level compromise." Elliot's jaw clenched. "Can we isolate the cause?" Shira paused. "We're trying, but there's no trace of how it got in." The room buzzed with movement. Analysts, engineers, and interns darted between workstations. Some whispered, some cursed under their breath. One guy just stared at his screen like it had insulted his family. This wasn't just a system crash. This was a catastrophe, and the timing couldn't have been worse. At 7 p.m., Elliot was scheduled to present the company's proprietary real-time analytics engine to a group of investors from Austin. Investors who had the power to pump $40 million into the firm, funding that would double the team, roll out a new AI suite, and finally push them past their biggest competitor. Losing the deal would mean more than missed opportunity. It would be a public disaster, the kind that guts leadership and ends careers. Elliot looked toward the window. The skyline of Dallas looked calm, unmoved. He felt like throwing a chair through it. But just then, Alexei from cybersecurity, a Russian-born tech genius with 3 phones and no sleep schedule, popped his head up from his station. "I think this was triggered internally," he said, voice low. "Someone or something in the building might have planted the command sequence." Shira froze. "What are you saying? Sabotage?" Alexei didn't blink. "Maybe." People in the room turned toward each other, a current of suspicion sliding into the air. Sabotage? In-house? Elliot shut his eyes for a second, trying to hold back the migraine that had been knocking for an hour. "This isn't happening," he whispered. Downstairs, in the break room near the service elevators, Zahara Rhodes was seated at a round plastic table, earbuds in, tablet glowing in her lap. Her fingers danced across the screen in a blur of blocks and text. Zahara was 12. She had no business being in the middle of a corporate tech crisis, but she wasn't here to be noticed. Her dad, Carl Rhodes, was the night janitor, and since school let out early today, Zahara had come with him. She liked the building. It smelled like lemon wax and printer toner. Plus, Carl had shown her how to swipe his ID card so she could sit quietly in the employee lounge while he cleaned. She wasn't a typical kid. While others her age were flipping through TikTok or crushing candy games, Zahara spent her time reverse engineering basic code and experimenting with Python scripts. She didn't talk about it much, mostly because nobody really asked. In her earbuds, a tutorial played. To override root access, you need to isolate the server object and restructure the pathing permissions manually. She paused the video. Something about that sentence clicked in her mind like a puzzle piece snapping into place. She looked up at the ceiling, thoughtful. Then she pulled her backpack closer and reached in, grabbing a beat-up notebook filled with scribbles and flowcharts. Meanwhile, back upstairs, the air was turning sharp. A project manager spilled coffee on the floor and didn't even notice. People were snapping at each other. The lead systems engineer, a usually quiet guy named Ramon, banged his fist on a desk and shouted, "We're going to get roasted in the press. We won't recover from this." Elliot looked around. "How long do we have before the investors arrive?" 3.5 hours, said Shira. "But it's not just about them. If word of this breach leaks to our partners before we get it under control, we're done." There was a knock at the glass wall. Carl stood outside holding a mop, eyes wide. "Sir," he said cautiously, addressing Elliot. "Apologies for interrupting, but Zahara says she thinks she knows what's wrong with your system." Silence. Every head in the room turned. Who's Zahara? Someone asked. My daughter, Carl said. She's 12. Laughter, light at first, then uncomfortable. Elliot raised a hand to silence them. What exactly does she think she knows? Carl shrugged. Something about a permissions overwrite and a server path error. Shira blinked. Elliot stared at him. Tell her to wait downstairs. Carl nodded and turned to leave. But as he did, he added over his shoulder. She said it sounded like a recursive call issue, if that means anything. Shira stopped mid-type. Her face changed. Wait, did she really say that? Carl nodded. That one sentence stopped the room cold, but no one knew yet that the kid in the break room was about to change everything. The air in the war room had shifted. What was once chaos and noise had frozen into a heavy pause. Shira stood slowly, as if trying not to disturb the silence. A recursive call issue, she repeated under her breath, eyes narrowing in thought. Elliot folded his arms. You think she just guessed that? Shira looked at her screen. That's a very specific guess. Recursive calls can lock a system if they loop into themselves with no exit condition. That's not something you pick up off TV. A young intern leaned toward Shira. But, she's 12. Shira turned her head. So? Nobody had a real answer. Downstairs, Zahara was still seated in the break room, earbuds out now, flipping through her notebook with focus that would put most adults to shame. She wasn't trying to be a genius or impress anyone. She just hated unsolved problems. And what she'd overheard on the elevator ride up was echoing in her mind like a song you can't shake. Carl walked in, his mop resting against the door. Z, what exactly did you say to them? I said it sounded like a recursive call got triggered. If they didn't set limits on the stack, it could crash the entire back end. Carl blinked, rubbing his forehead. Baby, I have no idea what any of that means. Zahara smiled. It's okay. I can write it down. Back upstairs, Shira pulled Elliot aside. Look, I know how this sounds, but we've thrown everything we have at this and nothing's worked. She's already mentioned something we haven't tested. You want me to bring a middle schooler into our server room? I want you to realize we're out of options, Shira said bluntly. Elliot stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and pointed to Alexei. Run a diagnostic on the call stack loop across the backup server. Alexei shrugged, already typing. Fine, but if the child is right, I'm going to be extremely uncomfortable. They waited. Seconds ticked like hours. Then Alexei looked up. She's right. You could have heard a paperclip hit the floor. There's a recursive call loop inside the server restart sequence, he continued. It's buried under a permissions override. The log says it was activated externally, but the loop is internal. Very weird. Elliot looked toward the door, then back at Shira. Fine, bring her up, quietly. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened again. Zahara stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder. Her dad stood behind her like a bodyguard, unsure if he should even be here. The room went still. Some people stepped back like they weren't sure what to expect. Others looked at each other like, really? This is happening? Zahara looked around, wide-eyed but not intimidated. Is it okay if I sit? Elliot gestured to the spare station near the side wall. Go ahead. Shira crouched beside her. Can I ask how you learned about recursive calls? Zahara pulled out her tablet. I've been working on a game. My sprite kept freezing because I didn't limit the number of times it could call a function to jump. So I read a lot of forums. Someone near the back chuckled quietly. Shira shot them a glare. Do you know what you're looking for? She asked. Zahara nodded and opened a terminal window. I think so. She plugged her tablet into a USB port and typed a few lines. The screen lit up with logs, lines of code flying by. She scanned them quickly, then froze. There, line 2023. It's calling itself, and each time it runs, it's spawning another instance without closing the last one. Alexei walked over, leaned down, and looked. She's right again. Zahara reached into her backpack and pulled out her notebook. She flipped to a hand-drawn flowchart. I think if you isolate the loop here, she pointed, and patch the parent command to terminate at 5 iterations, it should stop the chain. Elliot whispered, Are we seriously letting her do this? Alexei shook his head. I wouldn't let any kid touch our root commands, but I'd be dumb not to listen to someone who just spotted a loop that took 4 engineers an hour to miss. Zahara looked up. You don't have to let me fix it. I can just tell you how. Elliot glanced at Shira. She gave a slow, confident nod. Fine, he said. Tell him. Zahara spoke clearly, pointing out each piece of the puzzle. Alexei typed as she talked, adjusting code paths, patching the loop, setting limits. When he hit enter, the screen blinked. Everyone held their breath. Then slowly, monitors around the room started lighting back up, one by one. Email access, server dashboards, diagnostic tools, system health panels, even the investor files. Shira stared at the screen, blinking fast. It's working. It's actually stabilizing. Someone near the back clapped, then another and another. Zahara looked down like she wasn't sure what all the fuss was about. Carl stood in the doorway, trying not to cry. The mop in his hand trembled. Elliot didn't speak. He just walked toward the far window and looked out over the city again. This time, the skyline didn't look quite so cold. But Zahara's fix was only the beginning, because what came next shocked them even more. Zahara didn't say much after the room lit back up. She quietly unplugged her tablet, closed her notebook, and tucked it into her backpack like nothing had happened. She wasn't smiling, wasn't glowing with pride, just calm, focused, like she was still thinking it through. Carl stepped closer. You okay? She nodded. Yeah, just tired. Carl looked around at the full-grown adults whispering about his daughter like she'd landed a spaceship. The ones who didn't laugh when he introduced her were now whispering her name like it belonged in some Silicon Valley lore. He never said anything, but this moment, was the proudest he'd ever been. Meanwhile, Elliot and Shira stood side by side, watching Zahara like she'd just pulled a rabbit out of an empty hat. She did what you couldn't do in 2 hours, Elliot finally said. She's 12, Shira replied. Exactly. There was a strange energy now. Everyone was still relieved. The crisis, for the most part, was over. But beneath the relief, there was something else starting to build. Uncertainty, ego, doubt. Not in Zahara, but in themselves. A quiet, curious girl had walked into their world and done the unthinkable. And not everyone liked that. In the back of the room, Martin Lacroix, one of the lead software architects, leaned against a cabinet with his arms crossed. He hadn't clapped. He hadn't smiled. Now, he turned to Alexei and muttered just loud enough to be heard. She probably just stumbled onto it by accident. Alexei gave him a flat look. You didn't even notice it, man. Neither did you, Martin snapped. Alexei didn't bother responding. Up front, Elliot cleared his throat. All right, let's get things back to normal. Alexei, keep monitoring the systems for any relapses. Shira, get a sanitized version of the fix ready to log. The investor meeting is still on, and I want every file backed up and triple-checked. Carl reached out for Zahara's hand. Come on, sweetheart, let's get out of their way. But before they could leave, Shira stopped them. Wait, she said, crouching a little to meet Zahara's eyes. Can I ask something? Zahara looked up. Okay. Do you do this often? I mean, fixing things? Writing code? Zahara nodded. When I have time. I like puzzles. Shira smiled. And how'd you learn all this? I just started trying stuff. Watched videos, made mistakes, fixed them, tried again. Any teachers? Zahara shrugged. They don't teach this at school. Elliot stepped closer now, arms still folded. And you never thought of asking someone here for help? I didn't know I was allowed, she said simply. That one sentence made the room go quiet again. Carl shifted his weight. I always told her this was a grown folks' place. Don't bother nobody. Keep your head down. It's what you do when you clean offices people forget they walk through. Elliot blinked slowly. Shira stood up and turned to him. We hire consultants from 3 countries for 10 grand a day, and the only person who solved the worst system crash we've ever had was sitting in our break room with a notebook. Elliot didn't answer. He couldn't. His face was unreadable. But Martin spoke up from the back. This whole thing is getting out of hand. Look, I'm not saying she didn't help, but this isn't some feel-good movie. She had a lucky guess. That's it. Alexei scoffed. Call it luck if you want, man, but it saved your job. I'm just saying, Martin continued, stepping forward. We're professionals, years of experience, degrees. We built this company. A kid walks in and suddenly we're bowing down? No one agreed out loud, but a few people looked down. The silence was shifting again, something subtle and uncomfortable creeping in. Shira snapped, "You're threatened by a 12-year-old? I'm saying we don't know what we're dealing with," Martin barked. Zahara flinched, just a little. Elliot raised his voice now. "That's enough." The room fell into instant silence. He turned to Zahara and Carl. "She didn't come here to replace anyone. She came here because her dad had a shift, and she happened to be brilliant. You don't have to like it. But we all watched her do what none of us could." Martin didn't move, but he didn't speak again either. Elliot looked back at Zahara. "I don't know where you learned this stuff, but you have a gift, and I'd like to see what happens when someone actually supports that." Zahara blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, glancing at Shira, "we'd like to offer you a mentorship after school, on site. You'd work with Shira, or Alexei, get exposure to real systems, intern style, but with real guidance." Zahara looked at her dad. Carl was speechless. After a few seconds, he swallowed hard. "Only if you want it, baby." She nodded. "Okay." But just when things started to settle, Shira's screen flashed with a new alert, one that changed the tone in the room all over again. A sharp ping echoed from Shira's laptop. Everyone turned. She leaned over, tapping keys, scanning the new lines that had appeared on her dashboard. Her face tightened. "Wait, this isn't over." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "What now?" Shira didn't answer right away. She just kept typing, fast and hard. Then she turned the screen toward Alexei. "You seeing this?" Alexei leaned in. "That's another sequence. Different syntax, not from the recursive call." "Exactly," she said. "This isn't the same breach. This is a new one. Started 2 minutes ago." A low murmur rippled through the room. Martin scoffed. "Figures. Probably something she touched." Alexei snapped, "Would you shut up already?" Zahara stood a few feet away, backpack on one shoulder, clutching the strap tighter. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't say anything. Carl stepped in front of her like a shield. "If you're about to blame my daughter—" "No one's blaming anyone," Shira interrupted. "But something's still going on, and we need to figure it out fast." Elliot motioned to the screens. "Shut down external access. Isolate the internal servers." "I'm trying," Shira said, typing, "but it's fighting back. Whoever this is, they're inside. They're watching." Alexei added, "There's a secondary script hiding behind the admin commands. It only kicked in after the first one was cleared, like a contingency plan." "Which means this wasn't some accident," Shira said. "This was planted, designed to trigger one failure, then follow it with another." Elliot's voice dropped. "This was coordinated." Silence fell again. Carl slowly turned to Zahara. "You sure you want to stay in this room, baby?" Zahara didn't answer at first. She stared at the screen. Then she stepped forward, not bothering to ask for permission this time. She pointed. "That sequence, it's familiar. I think it's piggybacking on a system tool. Something that updates admin permissions on login." Alexei looked at her. "How would you know that?" She shrugged. "I tested one just like it on a game I was building. It made every new player get admin by accident. Took me days to fix." Shira blinked. "It's exactly that. It's bouncing admin access between ghost accounts. It's invisible on first inspection." Alexei nodded, almost grinning now. "The kid's not guessing. She's got instinct." Elliot wasn't smiling. "Can we stop it?" "Maybe," Alexei said. "But if we kill it the wrong way, it might wipe all user profiles permanently. It's like a tripwire." Zahara spoke again. "You have to null it before it activates again. Like, cancel its heartbeat." Everyone stared. Alexei pulled up a code window and typed. "She means suppress the background ping check. I can write a line to do that." Carl leaned over to Zahara. "Where did you even learn this stuff?" She smiled a little. "I watch a lot of people mess up and then figure out how to fix it." Alexei's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Okay, running suppression now." They waited. For a second, nothing. Then the flashing stopped. Shira let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "It's gone. We're clear." Elliot looked over at Zahara like he was seeing her for the first time. "You said earlier you didn't know if you were allowed to help." Zahara nodded. "Well," he said, voice steady, "you are. Starting now. If your dad agrees, I want to offer you a long-term mentorship, paid." The room buzzed again. Some people whispered. Some didn't speak at all. Carl blinked. Paid? Yes, Elliot said. After school, weekends if she wants it. You'll have access to one of our private terminals. Shira will supervise, and anything you create here will be protected under your name. Carl looked at Zahara, then back at Elliot. This don't feel real. Shira smiled. Neither did what she just did. Martin rolled his eyes. Are we really turning this company into a summer camp now? Elliot didn't even flinch. You can walk if you don't like it, but the smartest person in this room isn't you. Martin opened his mouth, then closed it again. Alexei stood and offered Zahara his hand. Welcome to the team. She shook it, eyes wide but steady. Carl looked like he might pass out. Elliot turned to Shira. Get legal to draw up a temporary guardian agreement. We're not letting her brilliance disappear back into the break room. Shira nodded, already pulling out her phone. Zahara finally smiled, not wide, not giddy, just small and proud. The kind of smile that says, I knew I could do it. I just didn't know if I'd be allowed. But while the room filled with relief, a single question hung in the back of Elliot's mind. Who planted the attack in the first place? And were they still inside the company? The tension hadn't disappeared, it had only shifted. Zahara had stopped the attack, yes. She'd plugged the holes no one else saw, yes. But the fact remained, someone inside Vantage Core Solutions had triggered this mess deliberately, and that changed everything. Elliot turned away from the screen and faced his leadership team. All right, we're not calling this solved, not yet. I want every login, every file access, every terminal event from the last 72 hours audited. If there's someone still inside our system, I want to know who, and I want to know why. Shira was already back at her laptop. I'll task the network team. We'll trace IPs and pull entry logs from physical and virtual terminals. Alexei added, and I'll run a forensic scan. If there's any digital signature left behind, I'll find it. Elliot nodded, quietly. No alerts, no notifications. This doesn't leave this room. People got to work again, but now there was an edge in the air. Paranoia, betrayal. The very idea that one of them could have sabotaged everything they built felt like a slap. Zahara sat back down near Shira, quietly pulling up a screen and just watching. Shira glanced over. Want to help? Zahara looked up. Can I? Shira smiled. After what you've done today, you can do whatever you want. They worked side by side. Zahara didn't try to take over. She didn't need to. She understood the rhythm. She knew when to speak and when to scan. She pointed things out no one had noticed. Old credentials still floating in the system, temp accounts that hadn't been deactivated, a login from a test terminal that hadn't been used in 6 months. This one, she said, tapping the screen. It doesn't belong. That machine was disabled weeks ago. Alexei looked over from across the room. She's right. That machine was scheduled for recycling, but someone reactivated it from the inside network. Shira frowned. Is it still online? Zahara typed a few lines. No, it's ghosted now. Which means someone used it as a shell, Alexei muttered. A decoy. Carl stood near the doorway, arms crossed, still trying to process everything. He hadn't said much, mostly because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His daughter sitting among top-level engineers like she'd been born into it. She was in her element, and for once, no one was trying to stop her. Zahara pointed to another entry. Here, this string, it's in every flagged instance. Same user key, ends in 009B. Shira zoomed in. Yeah, that's not a system user, that's hand-typed. Alexei nodded. Custom key, not a generated. They're slipping. Elliot walked over. What does it trace to? Shira hesitated. If I'm reading this right, the login path is registered to internal hardware. Alexei double-checked. Yup, they didn't come in through the firewall. They were already here. Zahara tilted her head. Someone who works here? Elliot's voice was flat. Looks that way. Silence again. Shira began pulling staff activity logs. One by one, names scrolled across the screen. Engineers, analysts, tech leads, even upper management. Elliot watched closely. Filter by those with back-end access and privilege clearance. She did. The list shrank to 6 names. Zahara leaned closer. That one, she said, pointing. That key matches the log from the reactivated machine. Shira squinted. No way. Elliot frowned. Who is it? Shira clicked. A name appeared on screen. Martin Lacroix. The room went dead quiet. Carl looked around. That's the guy who kept coming at Zahara, right? Shira nodded slowly. He was the only one questioning her being here, loudly. Alexei stood. He tried to discredit her because he was scared. She found the damage he caused. Elliot's face darkened. Where is he now? He asked. Left about 20 minutes ago, someone said. Said he was stepping out for coffee. He's not coming back, Elliot muttered. Shira turned to him. We going to the board? Not yet, he said. Let's finish the cleanup. Build the evidence. When we report this, we don't just need a smoking gun. We need the whole fire. Carl leaned closer to Zahara. You all right? She nodded, staring at the screen. I knew someone did it on purpose. The way the code was built, it wanted to fail. It didn't just happen. Shira said, You caught it. You caught him. Zahara looked down. I just didn't want y'all to lose everything. Carl exhaled slowly. You saved a company today. Elliot looked her straight in the eye. You didn't just save it. You raised the bar. Nobody here will forget what you did. But what Zahara didn't know was that the fallout from this day would follow her long after the screen stopped blinking, and not everyone would be ready for the changes she brought with her. By Friday morning, the office was quieter than usual. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that holds tension like it's stuck in the walls. The story had already started to spread. Whispers in the elevator, curious glances in the break room, Slack messages full of, did you hear? And is it true? Staff from other departments were hearing about the 12-year-old girl who walked into the war room and fixed what a room full of engineers couldn't. And more than a few were having trouble believing it. Shira stood in the server room, arms crossed, watching a team finalize a fresh security protocol. Zahara was next to her again, this time wearing a spare company hoodie 3 sizes too big and sipping apple juice from a paper cup. She should have had a badge by now, Alexei muttered from behind them, typing on his laptop. Feels wrong not to see her name on the log sheet. We'll get her set up today, Shira said. Zahara glanced up. Does it have to be a picture badge? Yeah, Shira smiled. Why? Zahara looked at her hoodie sleeves hanging past her hands. I don't like how I look in pictures. You'll look like the one who saved our entire back-end infrastructure. That's all anyone's gonna see, Shira replied. Meanwhile, upstairs in the boardroom, Elliot stood in front of a room full of stone-faced executives. Legal counsel, investor relations, department heads, all of them seated around the long glass table. In front of him, a projection of security logs, server reports, and one key slide with a name in bold, Martin Lacroix. This wasn't just negligence, Elliot said. This was malicious. A murmur ran through the room. One of the board members, a silver-haired woman named Denise Rowan, leaned forward. Are we absolutely sure? Yes, Elliot replied. We found his digital fingerprints on the fake admin shell. He rerouted permissions through a dormant system, knowing it would cause a crash and cover his tracks. Why? He didn't believe in the product, thought it was unstable. He'd been meeting with outside firms for months. We believe he was trying to sabotage the demo, maybe to force a buyout or a collapse. Denise looked at him over her glasses. And the girl? Zahara Rhodes, Elliot said. She found the hole, patched it, found the second breach, traced the origin. Everything we're showing you today is because she put the first piece in place. There were more murmurs, a few raised eyebrows. Someone near the back whispered, 12 years old? Elliot turned toward them. Some of you are wondering if this is a PR risk. I'm telling you, it's a gift. It's the kind of story companies beg for. It's raw, it's real, and it's a reminder that brilliance doesn't have a business card. A few heads nodded. Denise folded her hands. And you're mentoring her? I've already offered. She's with our systems team as we speak. Voluntary after school. Paid full oversight. Someone from legal chimed in. We'll need parent consent, non-disclosure forms. She's already signed a waiver. Her father's here every night. He's been with our custodial staff 5 years. Quiet, reliable, invisible. That word hit the room like a soft blow. Invisible. Until now. Back on the 12th floor, a group of junior devs passed Zahara in the hallway. One of them looked at her, then quickly looked away. Another one nudged his friend and muttered under his breath. Zahara noticed. She wasn't dumb. "Why do they look at me like that?" she asked Shira. Shira hesitated. "They don't know what to make of you yet. That'll change. They think I don't belong." "You belong more than half the people in this building," Shira said. "Give it time." Zahara looked down at her feet. "Time doesn't fix everything." Shira crouched next to her. "No, but being good at what you do, that changes things." Zahara didn't say anything. She just nodded, the way kids do when they're absorbing something too big to talk about out loud. Downstairs in the lobby, Carl signed out for the day. His hands were still dusty from floor cleaner, and his shirt had a bleach stain near the shoulder. He'd never been in the boardroom. He'd never spoken to the CEO outside of quick greetings. But now, people were looking him in the eye when they passed. Some even smiled. That was new. He stepped into the elevator and saw Zahara's reflection standing behind Shira on the screen. His girl, his kid, the same one who used to fix the broken Wi-Fi at the library without asking. He smiled, a quiet kind of smile. She'd always been bright, but now the world finally knew. But the pressure wasn't done. The media hadn't gotten wind of the story yet, and when they did, Zahara's life was about to change in ways no one was prepared for. By Monday morning, it was everywhere. Tech blogs, Twitter threads, LinkedIn posts, even a quick segment on a local Dallas morning show. 12-year-old girl fixes corporate meltdown, the headline read. Janitor's daughter exposes internal sabotage at leading tech firm. Her name was in the subhead, Zahara Rhodes. The office couldn't hide it anymore. By 9 a.m., journalists were calling. By noon, someone from a national news outlet was waiting in the lobby. VantageCore's press team scrambled to get in front of the story, but it had already grown legs and was sprinting. Shira pulled Zahara aside before things got out of hand. "I need to ask you something," she said gently. "Do you want to speak to the media?" Zahara sat on the edge of a workbench in the IT suite, hoodie sleeves still way too long. She looked unsure. "Do I have to?" "No," Shira said. "Absolutely not. You don't owe anyone anything." Zahara thought for a second. "If I talk to them, will it help someone like me do what I did?" Shira paused. "Maybe. It might show another girl sitting in a break room somewhere that she's allowed to try." Zahara nodded slowly. "Okay, but just once." By the end of the day, there were 3 camera crews set up in the lobby and a live feed scheduled for the evening. They kept it small, 1 camera, 1 reporter, Shira by Zahara's side. The questions were simple at first. "How did you know what to do?" "I taught myself. I like puzzles," Zahara said, voice low but clear. "What was it like working beside professional engineers?" "They listened to me. That made it easier." "What do you want to do when you grow up?" She paused, then gave a small shrug. "Same thing I'm doing now, just with a desk that's mine." Carl watched from off camera, hands buried in his pockets, eyes wet. The kid he used to read bedtime books to was now on TV, teaching grown people about integrity, attention, and how brilliance doesn't come with a tie. After the interview, Elliot pulled Zahara aside. "You did good," he said. Zahara looked at him. "Does this mean I'm famous?" Elliot chuckled. "For a while, yeah, but that's not what matters." She squinted. "Then what does?" He leaned down a little, serious now. "It's what you do with it. Being smart got you here. Staying kind, staying curious, that's what's going to take you farther than any headline." She nodded, quietly, like she understood more than he expected. The following week brought chaos. Emails from Ivy League outreach programs, scholarship offers, invitations to coding academies. But Zahara didn't want all that. Not yet. She just wanted to come in after school, sit next to Shira or Alexei, and figure out problems nobody else had noticed yet. That's what made her feel alive. But of course, it wasn't all applause. Online, the trolls came out, comments about how it had to be fake, that it was all for PR, that no kid could do what she did. Zahara read a few of them before Shira sat her down and said, "You can't make everyone believe in you. Just make sure you still do." That stuck. Carl started working days instead of nights, not because he needed to anymore. Elliot offered him a raise and better hours, but because he wanted to drive Zahara to and from the office himself, just to see her walk through those glass doors like she belonged. Because now she did. There were people who still side-eyed her, still doubted, but slowly their voices got quieter, because results speak louder than resumes. And every time Zahara fixed something, or spotted a vulnerability before anyone else, or asked a question no one thought to ask, it reminded the team that brilliance can show up in places we don't look for. One afternoon, weeks later, Shira sat with Zahara by the vending machines. "You know what still gets me?" she said, sipping her tea. "What?" "The fact that you weren't even supposed to be here that day." Zahara smiled. "I was just doing my homework." Shira laughed. "You changed more than our system. You changed us." Zahara looked down at her notebook, the one she still carried, even though she now had access to everything digital. The pages were worn, some were taped back in, but it still held the first diagram she drew, the one that saved the whole building. She flipped to the back and drew something new. A door, halfway open, with the words, "Keep asking," above it. That's what she'd learned through all of this. Don't wait to be invited. Don't ask for permission to be curious. Just walk in, gently, quietly. And if they let you speak, change everything. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, like your ideas don't matter because of your age, your job, or where you come from, remember Zahara. Remember that talent doesn't always show up in places people expect. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in a break room, waiting for a moment to be heard. Share this video if you believe every kid deserves to be seen. And if you've got a gift, don't wait for permission. Use it.